Yeah, we're going. Right, I guess welcome to CaffèInsights, episode 7 or 8. I'm not sure, but we can get someone to post about that. I'm Nick, as you can read below, and join me is Carlos Ortiz, all the way from Costa Rica, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, Carlos is the Global Volcafe Way Sustainability Manager for all origin operations under the Volcafe stable of producing supply chains. I guess tell us a little bit about that before we get into the deep dive on how coronavirus has affected you.
Sure. Thank you, Nick. Thank you for the invitation. And as you probably know, Volcafe has this worldwide operations. We are a coffee trading and processing company around the world. So we have field team operations on most of the coffee producing countries around the world. And there we also provide year-round services to these producers that are part of our supply chains. And we teach them aspects on social, environmental sustainability. We're also teaching them aspects on economic profitability, health and safety. So all the ranges of certifications plus market diversification and improvement on quality. So a lot of services that we're providing around the world. And that's part of what the service platform that we have called the Volcafe Way. You can check it also on our website, volcafeway.com, where you can see a little bit more of information on that. But it's basically a service platform that tries to aim to add value to the producer and also to add value to the roaster, and try to engage into this sustainability of the entire supply chain for the long term. So it's very exciting. And yeah, we have boots on the ground. We have about 250 field team members working every single day towards helping producers to improve their quality of life and then improve market access and so on and so forth, so that the entire supply chain can also perceive that there's a value addition and everybody gets their fair share of that pie. So we cannot live without the producer. We cannot live without the roaster. The roaster cannot live without us and the producer. So it's understanding your fair part on the supply chain and trying to do as best as you can. And that's where we kick in to try to help on those relationships.
Wow, fascinating job, man. And how did you end up in this position? What's your background?
Well, I started here already. I've been with the group 12 years already. I'm about to become a fixed asset here in Volcafe. I am an agronomist. I studied agronomy here in a university called Earth University, which is an international university for agronomy and sustainable agriculture. And then I started working with the Volcafe in 2008 as a field technician. So I would be the one giving the services to farmers, visiting them, making sure everything was right, and training, etc. And then I got had the blessing to be part of this trainee program internally. Then I got the chance to live in Guatemala and Colombia doing things for the group. And then 5 years ago, we came up with this idea internally on how to improve the services and the service platform. So I came back to Costa Rica, which was my home. And then we've been traveling all around the globe to implement this initiative internally, and also try to showcase it to our major strategic partners outside, so that they can also co-invest with us on these solutions. So it's been quite a journey, but it's been a very pleasant ride. Sometimes bumpy, but overall very enjoyable.
Yeah, so that brings us to a pretty good point. I mean, you've been in the system for 12 years, and you would have experienced some of the extreme volatility in the market since 2008. Yeah. How does the COVID crisis compare from a supply perspective against what you've been through already? Is there exponential kind of panic or fear or uncertainty?
There's a lot going on, and every country is different, and the way that every government is handling the crisis ends up also affecting how the supply chain on the supply side ends up working. For example, we have countries like Peru, where the government said, no, you just cannot go to the field, you cannot go to the trainings, you cannot, I mean, we have to keep this curve low. And even so, if you wouldn't pay attention to what the government was saying, if you try to get to the villages, the people from the village will kick you out and will say, hey, we don't want you right now, I'm sorry, but right now we're in this process that we can get infected if you bring the virus to us, so please leave. So that has affected a lot the work that we're doing on farmer support, because obviously it's not the same having an assessment from a phone than actually having the assessment and checking the improvements in the field. And also the training side of the things is also more complex, because you cannot gather people around to actually provide the training that you need them to acquire to improve whatever practice it is. Also on the sustainability part of the supply chain, on the chain of custody, a lot of the certifications just stopped doing the verification or auditing processes. For obvious reasons, they cannot also go to the field. They cannot also go check what's going on because of the regulations. So everything came to a point of stallment, what's going on. And that was fine on the Central American and also East African countries where the harvest season was already over.
Sure.
But when you think of Peru, when you think of Colombia, when you think of Brazil, these are countries that were about to start their harvest, either their middle harvest or their main harvest, and they were going to be, and they are actually being affected by the lack of labor to do the picking, to do the drying, the close of the borders between villages to go and deliver their coffee and sell their coffee to their market. So there's a whole new perspective if you were on harvest versus if you were on the pre-harvest season of your agricultural year. So it's been, affecting us all a lot, and everybody a tiny bit different depending on the moment of the coffee year that you were gotten into this pandemic.
Yeah, that's interesting. So in the regions where it is so significantly affected because of the harvest period, has Volcafe had to kind of step in and act as a financer in a certain degree, or is there some commitment that you've had to try and step up?
Sure. So yeah, we've been trying to support the producers that we're providing service to in several ways. So we've been partnering with the health and safety experts across all these regions. The company, being a global company, we have a health and safety committee that has been helping us to build some protocols on how to address any issue during the COVID pandemic. So how to say hi, how to approach the producer if you still need to go to do something to that farm, what type of protection you need. And we've also done that in the buying stations where the producers come and deliver their coffee to us. And even we've gone a little bit the extra mile with some strategic partners that have wanted to even co-invest with us on providing basic goods to some of the families that are part of that supply chain, because we know that their income was almost zero on those days, but they still needed to eat. So we've been providing some aids on that. We've also been helping and providing aids on protective kits, so alcohol, face masks, helping them, teaching them how to apply these protocols so that they can protect themselves and stop the spread. And even in some of the regions, we have even been helping with the transportation cost of the coffee from the farm to our buying station, because that's something that is now normally more complex because of the close of the borders between villages. So we are now, normally the producers come to our buying station and they deliver the coffee there, and it's part of their cost, but now we're trying to help them with that cost, subsidizing a little bit of that so that it doesn't end up affecting as much on their cost structure. So there's several ranges of ideas that have come up locally that we have been trying to support as much as we have been having the chance to.
Yeah. Do you think there is something, I mean, it's interesting the point about, I guess any country or state that's going to come through it effectively has got nothing to do with the views of the government. I guess it's more their competency, which I suppose they're not mutually exclusive. Do you think there is something unique about coffee producers and their demographic within these countries that make them more vulnerable?
As a friend used to say, yes and no at the same time, because most of the coffee producing regions are on the countryside, right? So you're more away from the urban centers where the population is massive and there's more risk of being having the virus. So I've seen that there's some countries that have even tended to just leave that agricultural sector aside and say, well, they'll be fine, either because they don't have enough resources to get there and make the preventive measures, or because they have been having to prioritize to invest more on the places that they have more population, rightfully so, because the chances of you being infected will be considerably higher if that happens, right? So, nevertheless, the internal communities have been the ones strongly organizing themselves to protect their own villages. And as I tell you, even if the government is not there, the people in the community won't even let you get into that village because they fear of this possible mixing and you getting contagious. So that is more basically what has been happening on most of these places.
Yeah, that's fascinating, because I guess naively, from an outsider's point of view, you tend to think of the economic fallout being the priority for some of these countries, right, rather than the pure epidemiological fallout.
Sure.
But perhaps it's not, yeah, maybe it's not. But it sounds like it's the other way around, basically.
No, it ends up being a balance of both, because I mean, if you go to Colombia or to Brazil, they'll say, no, we need those village borders to be open because we need these people to come and help us pick our crop, because if we don't do it right now, our quality is going to be spoiled and our possibility to sell to a better price and access to a better market is just not going to be there. And it's so time sensitive that you need that support and you need that labor. And one coffee tree can be producing 1,200 little cherries, and you need a lot of manpower to actually harvest, and that's only one plant. If you have 5,000 plants in a hectare, then you need a lot of people to help you to collect that ripened cherry at the right moment, so that you can also process it and have the best possible outturn of quality, and also the best possible outturn on your income. So it ends up being also an economic exercise, but also obviously you fear about your health and of your loved ones. So it ends up being a mix, as it's been in any other culture right now, with any other industry in the world with this situation, I believe.
So is there a risk in a severe drop in quality because of this globally? Because of,
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, we've been analyzing all these specific supply chains that are during harvest right now, and a lot of them, they just didn't get the pickers on time. So what will happen to your cherries that will over ripen in the plant, in stuck to the tree, or then it will be more difficult to have a fully good process of post harvesting. And that will just affect immediately the quality profile or the flavors. You can start having some fermented cups or some moldish cups because you couldn't harvest your coffee on time. Or more like it's been happening in some places in Colombia, where the bean ends up falling from the tree, and then you have to go and search and fetch from the floor. Sometimes you don't see it, And there is where this insect called the berry borer gets into that bean and then stays there and then contaminates the harvest of the next season. So it ends up having a lot of implications. The pandemic has been restructuring the way we try to do the trainings and how we can assess, but also the harvest. The entire harvest has been also compromised in a bit on the quality. And some of the other countries that have right now this gap, for example, the Central American countries where right now there's no harvest, they are already thinking on how to make sure that when the harvest season comes, they will have enough pickers. The regulations and the legislations of the country will allow them to bring the pickers, or even trying to do some semi-mechanized picking, where you have some type of machinery that will do the work faster for you. So there's already a little bit more time that these countries have had versus Peru, Colombia, Brazil, that just had the harvest just around the corner from the very first days from the pandemic. So we're learning from them, and we're also going to be trying to do what we can on the other countries so that they're not as negatively affected. But surely this will impact quality. I believe so, yeah.
And then what about overall? I mean, because I've heard conflicting, I guess, opinions on whether there'll be a surplus next year or a deficit.
Yeah.
And it seems to be obviously Brazil's, the main factor, I guess. And Brazil's a whole kind of another entity now with their president. I'm not sure if we need to get too political on it, but it's not. What I mean? I mean, that's a very concerning situation. Yeah. But in your experience, is it too early to tell? Is it kind of just hold your breath?
Yeah, Nick, whatever I can tell you, there's going to be people that would say that's the exact opposite, and there's people that will agree. So I don't think there's anybody that actually knows what this pandemic is actually doing. I mean, you just can think and try to be smart on your conclusions.
Sure.
We've seen that there's a lot of there was a big increase on the spot market when this began, rightfully so. Roasters wanted to get as much coffee in their warehouses as possible. Thankfully, or at least on my experience, coffee's demand is very inelastic. That means that it doesn't really affect a lot on price and what's going on. People still drink their cup of coffee. Probably the consumption out of home obviously got reduced, and the consumption in home got increased. Now, to what extent is that already closing that gap? Is the consumption will rise as much as in home as it was out of home? I really don't know that for a fact. I don't think it will get to that point. So
I think it's pretty. Most of the numbers around, especially in the conversations I've been having, is the evidence is that yes, there's an increase in home, but it's insignificant to the actual what would we consider normal consumption. Yeah.
Correct.
So here's a question for you. And this idea that how much of what Volcafe Way does is rooted in the pure sense that specialty coffee, quote unquote, is the kind of solution. Specialty is, I suppose, a pretty ambiguous term these days at the best of times, but let's just assume that it means, an organized, equitable value chain driven by quality. Is the quality thing, from your perspective, the true driver?
I like to think that the drivers of differentiation could be based a lot on the quality, the intrinsic quality of that coffee, but also there's a lot of other differentiator factors that you can actually be addressing or achieving on changes on the post-harvesting methods, or in adding some certification or sustainable standard to your coffee that will also probably give you the access to different markets. But overall, mainly, I think quality should be always the main driver of the value and of the price of a cup of coffee. But that said, if we focus mainly on price, Nick, we are forgetting that there's also other things that we can do in the coffee fields that could be reducing the cost of production of the producers, that could be helping them increase their productivity, and also that they could be helping them increase the quality. So Our statement or our focus on coffee farming is most producers don't know their cost of production. 99% of them, you go visit them and say, hey, how much is this bag of coffee worth? They just don't know. They don't keep track of records. So you're into a business where the people that produce the coffee have no clue on what the true cost and value of that is. Also, you have plants that are not as productive as they could be because of poor agronomic management. So there's a lack of agronomic, financial, and business administration knowledge across the world on how to farm as a business. So what we want to tell the coffee growers and families is, hey, stop being a coffee farmer and become a coffee business person. And how do you achieve that? Well, you have to start keeping track of your records, but also understand how to agronomically better manage your coffee plantation so that in times of crisis, as the one that we are right now, you are at least going to have a better chance of surviving it because you will have a very low cost structure because you will be very efficient. And also your production levels will be higher. So you can also dilute your fixed cost and even reduce your unitary cost, and also help you to achieve the best possible potential of your quality so that you can always try to have this access to different markets. And that impact is going to be better than whatever increase on differential or increase on price you can end up giving them, because you're teaching them how to structurally manage their business in a better way. And that's part of the thesis or the theory under what Volcafe Way wants to try to do, which is this farming as a business and trying to achieve this sustainable profitability with the producers. And we've been already 5 years into this initiative, and we've seen already the results across all the countries where we have implemented the methodology. And we would just like to try to keep expanding and scaling it a little bit more, because the model has proven it works. And in crisis, you will be better off doing it than not doing it.
Yeah, that's a great statement, actually. So in your opinion, do you see a distinction, or do you differentiate between, on a very basic level, between specialty supply chains and non, in the south end of the supply chain? Because it's quite easy to differentiate the specialty consumers from the right.
Yeah,
they kind of create their own, will try to create their own value proposition, but
right.
it gets pretty muddy when you're down the other end, because effectively it's whatever adds the greatest value. And I guess at some point the specialty coffee ethos gets so confused that it's it all starts in the same place, is what I'm trying to say, I guess.
Yeah.
So
No, I agree with you, and I believe this quality pyramid is very strange to follow and to actually understand, because specialty is considered whatever you get from 80 points up, and then there's countries that every time you cup is going to be 80 at least, so it becomes like a type of mainstream specialty. But the true differentiator of quality will start when you're on an 84, 85, 86 or plus cup. So there's this gap between the 80s and the 84s where you're saying, okay, where do I put this coffee that will actually be worth as much value as you can? And then you have in the tip of the pyramid, these micro or nano roasters that are paying very high prices for a pound of coffee, but they're not buying that much in volume, say because of marketing purposes or whatever the reason it is. But yes, you can be selling at $9 a pound, yes, but you will probably do 5 or 10 pounds of that, versus the 80 to 84 plus cups, which are way much more volume, and that in an overall quality profile can also serve different purposes for different brands. My main concern right now is that coffee is going to be drunk for sure, but now what type of coffee are you going to drink? If you're unemployed, if you have less disposable income, if you have to try to tighten your belt because things are not as they used to be at home with your expenses, probably your consumption quality will be lower, than you will probably start drinking another type of quality that you were not probably used to because of all these reasons. So how much of that can be actually sustained, and in how many years or months would that come back to what normal used to be? That's what I'm not really certain. I really would like to see that major roasters can keep on fulfilling their sustainability commitments, are fulfilling their quality profiles. But I also understand that if there's nobody that can actually be paying to drink for that, they will also have to be changing or shifting a little bit their production patterns so that they can fit that actual demand that is now new because of less income or whatever the reason is. It will go back someday to where it was. Yes, I do believe so. And with more so having the base of the consumption or young people getting into coffee every day more. But right now, a lot of people that were driving these trends are going to be without an income or with less income. So probably that will end up affecting all these micro and small roasters, and maybe the mainstream ones are going to be probably the ones balancing that out on these stages.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think there's a fine line between being too small and being too big, I think, especially in that realm. I mean, yeah, because you mentioned, the profitability of producers. The COVID might have kind of illustrated how inefficient and unsustainable some, small roasting businesses are, by no fault of their own, maybe, but the pressures of the market and and simply, especially in a place like London where rent is, categorically outrageous in some instances, and there's
right.
So yeah, a lot of the chat here has been how is functionally things going to reorganize themselves, but it's so hard to kind of play this guessing game because although it's a collective crisis, what it has done, it does make you kind of if you look at businesses as individuals, that individual is looking at not necessarily strategic forward thinking mode, but they go into survival mode, right? So it's very hard you can think that you might have an opportunity present itself, but then what are the actual motivations of the people, that are kind of, that were your audience, where is their head at? So it's a very, very strange time. Although things here have really kind of turned a corner in the last couple of weeks. By no assistance of the government, and I don't think we'll see what happens next. But generally speaking, I think it's pretty clear that if there was a more global sense of cooperation and a baseline framework from some of the global entities, something like this would be much easier dealt with and would eliminate the need to kind of shut down global economies.
No, fully agree with you. Yeah.
How do you see the impact of travel on specialty supply chains? One of the great I suppose existential questions for a small business is, at the same time, they understand that if they want to make an impact, it's very a relationship-driven supply model. You want to be face-to-face with producers. At the same time, you want to cut down your carbon footprint and all the stuff. They're often intertwined, but then you get on a plane, you know what I mean? And you can kind of justify it by talking to your importers, and they say, fundamentally, having you here is proof that it works.
Right.
I wonder if you've thought about how that might impact, the adoption rate in some communities to kind of buy into the process or whatever.
Yeah. So, I mean, for sure, it's been having a strong effect on everything that we do. And I'll tell you a little bit from each side that I can think of. So from our farming as a business and training perspective, we normally, in my team, we have several people, and we tend to go through all these supply chains and regions several times during a year to make sure that the Volcafe Way concept is being properly implemented. So that for sure is not happening right now. So hopefully the in-house knowledge that we already have in each country is good enough to have those gaps filled, right? But then when it comes to the selling side, there's a lot of coffee ends up being a very social business. It's not really a lot about where the coffee comes from or whatever. It's if you clicked with your peer on the supply chain, and if you did these good connections, and the more you get to know a person, the more you get to decide if you like it or like him or her or not, right? So that said, on these relations that these small roasters try to do is very difficult if they don't have the boots on the ground, because then this ends up being a big gap. You can try to fill it by doing these Instagram sessions on these virtual farm tours and here and there. And yes, we have to get creative and see what else we can do, because every crisis brings a lot of opportunity. But this human touch and this human contact and this empathy, it ends up being very difficult to achieve in a Zoom meeting or in a video call. And when you go there, you smell the dirt, you smell the smell of the water and the rain, and it's also another type of experience that normally ends up linking you more with that coffee and make you appreciate it more. So those roasters tend to even pay a little bit more because of the feelings that brings them when they are there, rightfully so, right? Now we have the blessing to be having the chance to be on those places every single day because of the structure we have. But surely I can see how that can have a strong impact on the smaller sized roasters, for sure.
Yeah, it'll be, it'll be very, I mean, and you could, the same challenges faced by all small businesses or, actors in the supply chain, from the smaller importers. I really feel for some of the smaller importers that don't carry a spot position, for instance.
Correct.
And they rely entirely on roasters being, savvy and forward thinking enough to be able to have predictable and long-term supply chains. But, really, and to no fault of anyone's, it's really has thrown a big spanner in that work. So I think there's a lot to be said. And from a UK perspective, from Volcafe, is there anything, if people want to engage with Volcafe coffees, is there anything specific?
Sure. So I was not intending to make a lot of commercial activity here, but as a side note, we have a UK office. It's been run by this great guy, Andrew Tucker, and so we have our Volcafe Select, which is Volcafe's specialty brand in Europe. So we have this importing facility, and we have all sorts of positive services towards small, medium, and big size roasters. Andy is always there to support, and he's also very creative always on trying to achieve this positive solution to whatever business that they have. So I would surely reach out to him without hesitation, and I know he will take good care of me regardless of the size of my business, because he really ends up caring more for the people that are running the business than for the business itself. And I think that's what has made him very successful on the last year or so that he's been already working with us there. So he's a great guy, and he'll listen to you, and he will try to help you and give you the best guided recommendation, and also help you get that cup profile that you're looking for. And more so in these challenging times, he's also very knowledgeable of what's going on. And through the Volcafe Way platform, he can also then provide this marketing material or pictures or videos that those roasters might also need, so that they can also try to have this connection that I was mentioning you before. So, I mean, there's a cup for everybody, there's a market for everybody, and whatever that is in the UK, you have Andrew Tucker over there.
There you go, Andrew. Some kind words from the boss. Hey, well, we've got about 5 minutes, I guess. But I'm really fascinated in this idea of, the broader value proposition presented by specialty coffee in order to convince people to care about coffee. You know what I mean? There's this kind of underlying notion that all you have to do is communicate some sort of sense of, morality, I guess, that appeals to people, and it'll inform, their willingness to pay higher prices for coffee. That and the experience. When you're in your day-to-day life, do you see a gap between what the market thinks about coffee and the reality of it?
Yes, I've sensed that, Nick, and there's one very clear example of where I see that, and I see this, and I say this as a positive and constructive criticism to the industry, or at least to the other side, which is with the roasters.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes I believe that we, as field experts or exporters, we need to help educate more these roasters and how they understand the true challenges of what's going on in the field, because there's a lot of noise and there's a lot of people talking a lot of things. Some of them are nonsensical, and it's probably just to take advantage of your ignorance on the topic to try to take advantage of that and sell you that coffee at a higher expense. Or when you end up promoting that coffee in the market, you end up telling people some things that are not necessarily always true. So I would say that that gap I see on how the challenges that we see and face every day with the coffee families are not being actually heard or transferred properly to the business owners on the roasters. For example, if I was to be a business owner in roastery, I really wouldn't go always to this nice picture of this happy family. No, I'll try to understand what are the challenges of that supply chain or that community, and how can I actually make a difference by buying that coffee from these people. So obviously I'm going to be biased, but I think that supporting the Volcafe Way initiative and helping producers to stop being coffee farmers and become entrepreneurs, that is a very novel idea that will actually trigger some positive reactions across that community and across that country and across that family. Because and I don't intend to get philosophical here, but it's the same way as teach a man how to fish, or provide the fish already in a platter with some chips. You know, they will never get to learn something if you don't actually go and teach them how to do it. And that's the type of knowledge transfer that you would like everybody to have, so that you don't become indispensable for them, and then you can start engaging into different relationships and added value service proposals, so that you can actually improve. But if the basics are not covered, you should not be then tackling other things that are more a luxury than the true challenges. At least, again, that's my honest perspective and my personal view of how I see it. And we've tried to do that with a lot of roasters, telling them, hey, really, let's understand the true context of where this coffee is coming from, so that we can then put everything into perspective. Because the other way around, it doesn't end up working, and then you end up frustrating or even telling some things that are not necessarily true. So
yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, I've been saying for years, actually, or not that people listen, that the industry needs to kind of re-educate itself. A lot of the narrative and how do we convince the consumer to kind of buy into this proposition? It's confusing for the fundamental middlemen, then it's very confusing for the end user. So yeah, that's a great point to finish up on. Hey, Carlos, thank you so much for your time, man. It's been a real pleasure. And,
sure, Nick. Thank you for having me here. And yeah, if there's anything else I can do for you or the organization, please let me know. And very happy to have exchanged some ideas with you guys.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone.